You'll often hear the phrase, Texas is a land of extremes. July 5th, 2025 is a striking example of why this phrase will not leave the modern vernacular despite anybody's best efforts. But what must be understood about the saying is that, even within the context of the extremes, lay even more extremes. The paradoxical nature of this landscape cuts through even the most stalwart of nature's lashings. The Guadalupe River peaked at 34 feet in Kerrville, Texas. With it, swept away numerous lives and livelihoods. The South Fork of the San Gabriel, near Liberty Hill, crested at over 31 feet. Its average height is 3 to 5 feet. Cow Creek in the Balcones Canyonlands peaked at almost 30 feet. It is normally dry. Yet, here on the Pedernales or even on the nearby Blanco, river levels rose up a measly amount. Where one town may see apocalyptic floodings that must have felt like the end times, others saw nothing more than light rain and a welcome rise in otherwise drought-stricken waterways. This unevenness is a true hallmark of the region. The chaos isn't just in the volume of water, but in where it decides to fall, how fast it arrives, and how little time we're given to respond. The very same storm system that causes devastation just miles away may leave another community unscathed or even thankful. So, how do we justify this? How do people willingly submit themselves to what can feel like an abusive relationship with the land and still manage to call it home? How do they reconcile that risk with the sense of belonging or even safety?
You may have heard of the phrase Splashfoot Alley, and in many ways this is an apt description, but I take issue with the word alley. To me, it's less of an alley and more of a vast theater where water is just waiting for its cue. Whether that is destruction or life, only it knows. This theater stretches across the vast Texas landscape, and this broad production encompasses escarpments, basins, dry creek beds, and numerous rivers. That theater is much like Texas, contradictory, outsized. It appears to be moving in slow motion, but when it does decide to move, it does so with a force seemingly unstoppable. It is here where the seeds of July 4th and 5th were sown.
In the countless box canyons, valleys, creeks, and basins of central Texas, water begins to gather. As rain falls across this vast terrain, drop by drop, minute by minute, it collects, pools, and converges. The quiet summation of these natural features builds towards a crescendo in the form of the river. In a slow rainfall year, or worse, during a drought, that river may seem like little more than a trickle. To those unfamiliar with this landscape, it might appear no different than a modest creek. I remember a friend visiting from the Northeast. On first seeing the humble South Fork of the San Gabriel, he quipped, "That's a river? It looks more like a creek." I pointed out the height of the limestone cliffs, the bare rock walls stripped clean of vegetation every few years by the next great flood. I told him the water could rise 10, 20, sometimes 30 feet above where we stood, all the way to those cliff edges. He could hardly believe me, and I don't blame him. This volume of water and this scale of destruction is incomprehensible, unless you've seen it. It's in these cliffs and in the many other relics that line our waterways that the river offers an almost oral history of flood. We find scoured limestone walls, worn smooth by numerous past torrents. Stranded driftwood and tangled debris fields rest high in the trees, left behind by the waters that once surged through. Exposed roots twist out from the riverbanks, marking where soil once held firm before being pulled away by the current. We may even find the remnants of humanity's attempts to constrain something that will not abide. The stories these relics tell are not just echoes of the past. They are warnings and reminders of what unfolded on July 4th and July 5th. And the memories of that day should serve as more than history. They should remind us of what will happen again. What follows after this is not a celebration of what is, by all accounts, a tragedy. I will also not partake in the spiraling conversation of who holds the proverbial bloody knife. Instead, this is my attempt at reflection, a contemplation of why this happened, an internal interrogation of my own reasoning for living in a place that, at times, seems to suggest my presence is unwelcome, voiced through its cruel cycles of weather. And most importantly, How do we move forward not in fear or apprehension, but in confidence and respect? Flooding is not an anomaly here. It's part of the rhythm of the land, and as much as floods can destroy, they also shape, create, and replenish.
The lessons we need, the ones I hope to explore and share, are not about stopping the unstoppable. That would be an exercise in futility. They are, however, about recognition, respect, and above all else, adaptability. So, back to the question at hand. How do we reconcile with this? And the answer to that question is deeply personal. And that answer will change not just depending on which person you ask, but also the events of the past weeks or months. I imagine many are contemplating this relationship right now. And that's the thing, many Texans don't justify it, they just live with it.
Others contextualize it as a trade. Danger exchanged for beauty. A temporary transaction of resplendent connection, but at the cost of looming uncertainty. Some stay because it's home. The land or home exists not just as a physical structure, but as an edifice of familial history. The floods acting as bookmarks in a rich generational memory passed down from generation to generation. Others find themselves drawn here to the siren's call of the floodplains. Can I make that transaction? Will it happen to me? What ties them together is a shared understanding, or at least one can hope, that living here means living attentively. It means remembering what happened and preparing for what will happen again. And perhaps that's the answer. Not justification, but responsibility. A relationship, however fraught, that continues because we've chosen to understand it rather than control it.
Should we undertake this metamorphosis of approach, we must begin to understand that our past, present, and future are written in the shapes and contours of the land and the rivers.
Long before maps and dams, the people of this region, the Tonkawa, the Lipan Apache, the Coahuiltecans, and more, moved with the rhythms of these creeks, not against them. From a scientific standpoint, the behavior of these watersheds is neither mysterious nor new. The Balcones escarpment and the hill country's fractured limestone topography create ideal conditions for rapid runoff. When intense rainfall meets shallow soil and steep slopes, water doesn't seep, it sprints. This is what makes Central Texas one of the most flash flood-prone regions in North America.
As our weather systems become increasingly unpredictable, so do the rivers. Now, more than ever, our relationship with these bodies needs to be assessed.
Urbanization compounds the problem. Impervious surfaces like asphalt and concrete accelerate runoff, funneling water faster and with more force. Natural floodplains, once capable of absorbing excess water, are paved over, dammed, built upon. In our efforts to tame the land, we've often made it more dangerous in a certain way. This is where that relationship turns unhealthy. We romanticize the land, even as we try to bend it to our will. We build in flood zones, redraw riverbanks, straighten creeks, and then act surprised when water reminds us that it still holds dominion overall. There's a stubbornness here, a cultural muscle memory that equates control with safety and mitigation with weakness. But nature doesn't negotiate, it adapts. And if we're to live here responsibly, we have to reciprocate.
The rivers have always had their say. And the question is if we're willing to listen. Not just after a tragedy, but before the next one. The land too calls, not in expectance of a response, but to let us know of its intent. And should we listen or hear these calls is not of the land's concern. The land will be here much longer than we will.
It speaks in a language more primal, visceral, and objective than anything us humans can conjure. It speaks in trees ripped from their roots. It speaks in relics of human progress now strewn across a humble stream. A somber reminder of who still runs the show. Here, in this wide and willful country, water is our alpha and our omega. How lucky we are to witness this performance, but we must also understand that although we try as we might, we will always be the audience and never the actor.
And perhaps that is the lesson we keep returning to. Flood after flood, year after year, we're not meant to conquer this place. Instead, we're meant to be shaped by it. I would argue, in fact, we don't have a choice.